About a year ago, a dresser came into my shop that I almost told the owner not to bother with. 4 drawers, a little swing mirror bolted to the back, that boxy, straight-lined shape you see on a lot of furniture from the last 30 years of the 1800s. Somebody had already loaded it into a truck once, headed for the dump, before a neighbor talked them into calling me first. I understood the instinct to just be rid of it. The old varnish had gone almost black and sticky in the raking light, the kind of finish that grabs your fingertips a little when you touch it. One drawer front had lost its edge banding entirely, a thin strip of veneer that had curled up and away from the wood like old wallpaper. The brass pulls were not brass-colored anymore. They were a dull, crusted black-green, the kind of tarnish that builds up over 100 winters, not 10. One caster wheel was frozen solid and had gouged a little arc into the floor wherever it had last been dragged instead of rolled. If you had shown me a photograph of that dresser and asked me to guess its future, I would have guessed firewood, same as its previous owner did. I get calls like that more often than you would think. A piece somebody has already mentally written off, sitting in a garage or a barn waiting for someone to finally haul it away, and most weeks I agree with them. This time, something about the proportions made me ask for one more week before anybody made that decision final. My name is Glen Van Dalen, and I have spent most of my life with sawdust in the creases of my hands, restoring furniture that other people had already given up on. I want to be honest with you before we go any further, because I think honesty is the only thing that actually earns trust in this line of work. Most of what comes through my shop is exactly what it looks like once you clean it up. A decent, useful, ordinary piece of furniture with no hidden fortune attached to it, and there is nothing wrong with that at all. A well-restored, ordinary piece is still a beautiful thing to own and use for another 100 years. But every so often, a piece crosses my bench that turns out to be something else entirely, and tonight I want to walk you through exactly how that happened with this dresser, what I actually found, and what it would honestly mean if it happened to you. Let me back up and explain what this style of furniture even is, because the name gets thrown around loosely, and most people who own a piece like this have no idea where the word actually comes from. Eastlake is named for a real person, an English architect and writer named Charles Eastlake, who published his ideas about household taste back in 1868. He was reacting against the heavy, over-decorated Victorian furniture of his own time, all those carved scrolls and curling vines and gilded flourishes. Eastlake argued for something plainer and more honest, geometric lines, shallow incised carving instead of deep floral relief, straight edges instead of curves, construction you could actually see and understand by looking at it. That style caught on hard in America, roughly between 1870 and 1890, and factories across the country turned out an enormous amount of furniture in that general look. Most of it, and I mean the overwhelming majority of it, was ordinary factory work. Good, solid, honestly built furniture, but factory work all the same, made in volume by workers whose names were never recorded anywhere on the piece itself. Here is the detail that actually matters, the one I want you checking on your own furniture by the end of this video. A small number of Eastlake pieces were not factory anonymous at all. They were made, or at least finished and sold, by a handful of very high-end cabinet-making firms who did mark their work, usually with a stamp struck or burned directly into the wood, rather than a paper label, because paper labels from this era almost never survive a century of moves, spills, and basement storage. A stamp cut into the actual backboard of a case, or the underside of a drawer, or the back of a mirror frame survives just fine. That stamp is not folklore. It is not a maker's initials somebody's grandmother mentioned once at a family dinner. It is a physical mark you can put your own finger on tonight, and it is the single biggest reason 2 dressers that look almost identical from across a room can be worth wildly different amounts of money. The name you most want to know for this particular category is Herter Brothers. Gustav and Christian Herter were German immigrant brothers who ran a design and furniture-making firm out of New York from 1864 until 1906. They were among the very first American firms to offer what we would now call full interior decoration under one roof: furniture, upholstery, wall paneling, mantels, carpets, all coordinated by the same shop for the same client. Their client list reads like a roll call of the Gilded Age, the Vanderbilts, Jay Gould, J. Pierpont Morgan. They even furnished the Red Room in the White House during President Grant's administration. They worked across several fashionable styles of their era, including Eastlake, and they became especially known for ebonized furniture, wood-stained and finished nearly black, through the 1870s and into the 1880s. And critically for us tonight, they stamped their work directly into the furniture itself, which means a genuine Herter Brothers piece is something you can actually verify by looking, not something you have to take on faith. Herter Brothers is the name I want stuck in your head tonight, because it is the one behind my own dresser, but it is worth knowing you are not only hunting for a single word. Other high-end firms from the same general era also marked or retailed premium Eastlake-style work, names like Potier and Steimus, or pieces sold through department stores such as Wanamaker's under their own retail mark. None of those names guarantee a number anywhere close to what I am about to walk you through, but any struck or branded mark at all, on a piece that otherwise looks like ordinary factory furniture, is worth treating as a research project rather than dismissing outright. Back to my dresser. Restoring it was not glamorous work, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. I worked through that blackened old finish with a stripper made for exactly this kind of build-up, then followed it with a degreaser, because decades of hand oils and old wax had settled into the grain right alongside the finish itself, and skipping that step just means you are staining over grime later. In the corners and along the carved incised lines, where the stripper could not quite reach without me risking the wood underneath it, I worked a carbide scraper by hand, slow, patient passes, checking constantly so I never gouged past the old finish into fresh wood. That curled-up strip of edge, banding on the drawer front, I did not tear it off and start over. I warmed it gently with a household iron, just enough heat to soften the old hide glue underneath, and press it back down flat where it belonged, which keeps the original material on the piece, instead of replacing it with something new. The hardware went through a soda blaster, which lifts a century of black corrosion off old brass without pitting or scarring the metal, the way a wire wheel would. After that, a wood conditioner to even out how the wood would drink in color, a gel stain in a warm walnut tone, and several thin coats of a satin lacquer built up slowly, one coat at a time, to protect all of it going forward. It was near the very end of that process, with the case tipped up onto its side so I could get a rag into the back and clean the runners the drawers ride on, that I actually saw it. Not a maker's label, because as I mentioned, those almost never survive. A stamp struck straight into the backboard of the case, small, a little worn at the edges from age, but completely legible once I got a work light angled across it instead of straight onto it. 2 words. I will admit, I sat back on my heels and just looked at it for a minute before I said anything out loud to my own empty shop. I have handled a lot of furniture in my life, and I have found plenty of pencil marks, chalk numbers, and shipping labels on the backs of old case pieces. I had never once found this particular stamp on a piece that had come to me looking like it was headed for a burn pile the week before. I photographed it from 3 or 4 angles under different lighting before I let myself get excited, because a worn stamp can fool you, and the last thing I wanted to do was call the owner with news I could not actually back up. Now I want to slow down here and be completely straight with you, because overselling a story like this is exactly the kind of thing that makes people stop trusting furniture videos altogether, and I refuse to do that. My dresser has not crossed an auction block. It is currently with a specialist who authenticates work from this specific maker, because a stamp alone, while a very strong sign, still deserves a second set of trained eyes before anyone puts a serious number on it. What I can tell you, honestly and with real sources behind every figure, is what confirmed authenticated pieces carrying this exact stamp have actually sold for in recent memory, at real auction houses, with real hammer prices on record, not a guess and not a rumor. Let's start with the honest baseline, because I never want you walking away from one of these videos thinking anything short of a miracle is a disappointment. An ordinary, unmarked Eastlake bedroom suite, 3 matching pieces, solid walnut, a marble inset top, no maker's stamp anywhere on it, sold at a regional auction house in December of 2021 for $575. That is a completely fair, honest number for a nice, ordinary example of this style. And if that is what is sitting in your guest room right now, that is nothing to be embarrassed about. It is real furniture, worth real, if modest, money. Now here is what changes the moment a genuine Herter Brothers stamp enters the picture. Bedroom suite, originally built for a California senator and banker named Milton Slocum Latham for his estate called Thurlow Lodge, spent decades sitting in the prop storage of Warner Bros. Studios before it ever reached an auction house at all. When it finally did, at Bonham's in New York in January of 2009, the carved, inlaid, ebonized bed from that suite, the top lot of the day, sold for $326,000. The matching mirrored dresser from that same suite, the piece closest in form to the one sitting in my own shop right now, sold that same day for $103,700 to a pair of collectors from Louisiana. And that is not an isolated fluke either. A separate Herter Brothers dressing table with a mirror, inlaid with marquetry, marble, and glass, made for another Gilded Age California mansion and stamped twice on the back, sold at Bonham's again in June of 2022 for $113,775, including the buyer's premium. And in September of 2024, at a completely different auction house up in Hudson, New York, a Herter Brothers stamped cabinet sold for $44,800, in a sale where, according to that auction house's own director, every single Herter Brothers piece on offer performed exceptionally well. 3 different pieces, 3 different years, 3 different auction houses, and the pattern holds every time. That is not a lucky one-time sale. That is what a verified stamp from this particular maker consistently does to a final price. So here is what I want you to actually go do tonight, before you decide anything about an old dresser, chest, or washstand sitting in your own house. Pull a drawer all the way out, flip the case around, or get a light and a mirror underneath it if it is too heavy to tip. Look at the backboard of the case itself, the underside of the drawers, and the back of any attached mirror frame. You are looking for a stamp, letters struck or burned directly into the wood, not painted, not stuck on with paper. It can be faint. Angle a flashlight sideways across the surface instead of straight down onto it, the same way I found mine, because raking light catches shallow lettering that flat light hides completely. If you find lettering you do not recognize, do not assume it is meaningless. Photograph it clearly, in good light, and start researching that exact mark before you do anything else to the piece. Check drawer bottoms too, not just the case back, since some firms stamp the underside of a drawer instead of, or in addition to the main case, and check the frame behind the glass on any attached mirror, since that flat wooden backing is another spot a stamp survives well. While you have that drawer out, Take 30 seconds to also look at how the corners are joined together. Furniture from before about 1870 was almost always joined by hand, with slightly uneven dovetails, the kind where the spacing shifts just a little from one joint to the next, because a person, not a machine, cut every one of them. That is not proof of a famous maker on its own, but it does tell you that you are looking at genuinely old, genuinely hand-built construction, which is exactly the kind of piece worth researching further rather than writing off. And whatever you do, resist the urge to sand, strip, or repaint anything before you have actually looked. Eastlake furniture in particular was built to show its natural wood grain, never intended to be painted over in the first place, so a piece somebody painted decades ago may be hiding more of its original character than you think, and a piece with a maker's stamp you have not yet found can lose real value the moment that surface gets sanded away by someone in a hurry. I have put together a written guide that walks through exactly what a genuine maker's stamp looks like on furniture from this era, where to look for one on a case piece, a mirror, or a set of drawers, and how to tell genuinely old hand-cut joinery from a later reproduction. It is linked below, built the same honest way everything else in this video was built, around real, checkable sources rather than guesses, dressed up to sound exciting. If you take one thing away from tonight, let it be this: that dresser sitting in your basement, your garage, or your late relative's spare room is not going to announce itself. Nobody is going to knock on your door and tell you what you actually have. The only way anyone finds out is by pulling a drawer, tipping the case, and actually looking at the wood itself, instead of guessing from across the room. My dresser was one truck ride away from becoming firewood before anybody bothered to look at its backboard. I think about that almost every time I walk past it in my shop now, half restored, waiting on a specialist's final word, and I think about how close it came to never being looked at properly at all. Go look at yours tonight. You might find nothing more than a builder's pencil mark, and that is perfectly fine. Or you might find 2 words stamped into old wood that change everything you thought you knew about a piece of furniture you were ready to give away for free.